dispute. Climate change is real. The liability of humans is questionable. Then there's the false argument often put by so many so-called environmentalists as one of environmentalism versus humanism. Those who disagree are the enemies of the environment. This is not a legitimate argument, and when such arguments take hold in environmental policy, it is usually to the detriment of both humanity and the environment. There are many alternatives for reducing harmful emissions, many of which are far more harmful than those addressed by the government's proposed emissions trading scheme. We need to canvass those options and subject them to rigorous review, the type of scientific review which has not yet been applied to this debate. Populism has taken precedence over science. Spin has taken over from common sense. There tend to be arguments about water and air quality and putting forward a negative association with industry and prosperity. Another argument that is put is that population is too large and needs to be reduced. Let's consider these issues. Think about the nations with the best air and water quality. They tend to also be the world's most prosperous nations. The same goes for birth rates. The nations with the lowest birth rates are the most affluent. Residents of poorer nations have more children to assist them with work and provide for their old age. So the conclusion should be that in order to improve air and water quality and reduce the birth rate, the best thing to do is to assist those less well-off nations to become more affluent. This is in stark contrast to the likes of Maurice Strong, first Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme and Secretary General of the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992, who has stated, and I quote, "Isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialised nations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about?" Strong's quote clearly demonstrates the real agenda of much of the environmental movement. They will go to any lengths to promote their agenda. Consider Stanford's climate alarmist Professor Stephen Schneider, who in the 1970s was one of the leading scientists promoting the view that we were all doomed as we were headed towards an ice age. He is now saying that we're all doomed due to a heating planet. He has stated, and once again I quote, "To do that, we need to get broad-based support to capture the public's imagination. That, of course, entails getting loads of media coverage. So we have to offer up scary scenarios, make simplified, dramatic statements, and make little mention of any doubts we may have. This double ethical bind we frequently find ourselves in cannot be solved by any formula. Each of us has to decide what is the right balance between being effective and being honest." These are not the words of a genuine scientist, but of a populist with an agenda to peddle. These examples highlight the importance of organisations such as yours, where the data and the evidence, not the spin, are the critical factors that need to be considered, particularly when the results are to be used in the formulation of policy. There are multiple components that concern me with the issue of anthropogenic global warming and reductions in carbon dioxide emissions. While the gap between climate observations and model projection outputs continue to diverge, the ardour and the shrill character of the alarmists increases. In my view, the IPCC needs to be dissolved. If it is felt necessary to have a global warming organisation examining climate, the mission statement needs to change so that human-caused climate change is not taken as a given. Climate change needs to be studied without preconceived outcomes relating to human causes. The peer review process needs to be genuine and not simply have comparatively few authors being able to simply ignore reviewers' advice or criticisms. In that regard, the IPCC has no genuine peer review process until such times as reviewers' comments cannot simply be ignored given the predisposition of a few authors. That process leads to institutionalised groupthink that is endemic within the IPCC. Finally, the process genuinely needs to be driven by scientists in multiple disciplines with differing viewpoints